Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Stuart Hillston, a psychotherapist specializing in work with entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, over to Stuart.
It's just,
I don't know.
Some people will say, I can't explain it.
I don't know if you're familiar with Brené Brown. Do you know her?
I am.
This kind of the central theme of what a lot of what she talks about is the absolute need to show vulnerability. And to be very open about that, even in the corporate setting. I'm wondering, is that, I'll tell you, when I hear that, that scares the shit out of me. The idea that you're going to go, and maybe it's because I've been doing this too long, but the idea of suddenly showing vulnerability is terrifying to me as a thought. And I'm wondering, do you think it's realistic to take these people that are hardwired, that are compelled, that are obsessed, that are leaders, to be vulnerable? Is that possible?
I think it is. I think it's extraordinarily difficult. And I think, as Brené Brown would say, it is brave. Daring to be brave is a difficult thing. And our assumptions about how people will react feed into our beliefs and our fears and our decision making. If you've never been vulnerable, if you've never expressed it to other people and seen pretty much most of the time overwhelming support, if you've never been through that process, it's like closing your eyes and stepping off into a gap in Indiana Jones where there's a hidden bridge, Until you know the bridge is there, you're not going to step off into the void.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things that in theory we know is valuable, but in practice is extremely difficult to do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering, is there a relationship between entrepreneurship and leadership and substance abuse?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Do you know, with entrepreneurs, most of the substance abuse I have seen personally, so this is only anecdotal, has been at the end of the journey, not during it.
Interesting.
Leadership outside the entrepreneurial context, I probably don't have enough experience of working with people in those contexts because I tend to focus on entrepreneurs, the people who work with them, and high growth companies. So I don't know that I have enough experience to give you a useful guide on that. I think the question might be, are entrepreneurs more susceptible to substance abuse than the average population? Will they work in high stress environments? And for some people, the way in which they comfort themselves from the stress will be some form of self-harm, whether that's alcohol, recreational drugs, food, and those sorts of things. And I think that my anecdotal thoughts on that would be yes, possibly, but I think it's tempered by being in the public eye, particularly for entrepreneurs who started to gain significant traction, being in the public eye and not wanting, we live in an age of constant media, not wanting to be caught out.
Right. And I'm just thinking as well, if you're suppressing a lot of these emotions, it's got to come out some way, right?
Yeah, I think it tends to come out in depression and lack of motivation and loss of hope.
Wow, that's really...
with depression, we talk about the 4 lesses, hopeless, worthless, useless, helpless. I think that hopelessness sometimes strikes unexpectedly for entrepreneurs. And, the depression gets to the point of being physically unable to get out of bed or move, rather than resorting to things like recreational drugs and alcohol, those emotions accumulate internally until the point at which they become, they have a toxic effect on our motivation.
So I'm thinking that I definitely need a wine company to sponsor this program as an alternate to depression. Drink Pinot Grigio. I'm interested.
Make it malt whiskey, please, Robert.
I'll find one of those sponsors as well, Stu, for you. We both work around young entrepreneurs, and I'm curious. We've got this generation of, let's call them Gen Z, that's coming up, and there have been some people that have called them a lost generation, some people that call them fragile. I'm curious. Do you think this new generation is fit for purpose for entrepreneurship? And what are some of the unique challenges that they may face that perhaps previous generations haven't faced?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? It's a curious thing. I'm sure you're aware that Harvard Business Review did a survey of the ages of the most successful entrepreneurs and decided they were 35 to 45. What I love about working with younger entrepreneurs is they don't know what the rules are. And I think anybody who thinks they know what the rules are is immediately constrained. And so I think the younger generations are not constrained by that thinking, and therefore will try things that everyone else says, we tried that 10 years ago, it didn't work. It's like, well, that was 10 years ago. It probably didn't work on fax machines, but it probably will work on a modern media, on TikTok or something like that. So are they facing different challenges? I think the biggest challenge for anyone when working with people is working in virtual teams and remotely. And I think that's the challenge of our times as a consequence of the rise of distributed teams, COVID, what we're using now, online conference tools and video chat tools. I think those present problems in building rapport, relationships, and empathy that you need training in, actually. I think they are uniquely equipped. They have some things that are unique to our times that older generations didn't have. I tend to find they are more aware of other people. They're a bit more empathetic. They're, I think, more considerate, and they're very, very focused on their own family's survival in the longer term. So particularly driven by social injustice and environmental issues and toxicity in general, I think. So it's all counterbalanced, but I think the remote working one is the biggest challenge, and we're not going to change that. We have to embrace it, and I think that's probably the generation to do it.
That with the point that you made about their sense of business being something greater than just the pursuit of money is something that has come through repeatedly, loud and clear. It seems that the vast majority of these young entrepreneurs I speak to is clearly leading with the idea that they want to create something, and it better be in some way, shape, or form contributing good to the world. Consistently, I come across that, and I think
absolutely
that is an immensely admirable characteristic to have, particularly given the age that we live in now, for sure. I'm incredibly hopeful. I'm these people are the best and the brightest, and they've faced some unique challenges that I've observed, but they seem to have their heads screwed on straight. I mean, I think it's too easy to look at this kind of Kardashian effect, this self-obsession and social media, and think that that's the defining characteristic of the generation. But I think it's very much missing the point of that thoughtfulness and awareness of the world around them, and that things have to change.
There's always been people who exploit opportunities for their own gain. I think younger generations than ours are aware of the superficial nature of some of those things, and I think they're deeply concerned about the more meaningful issues in the world. And let's be honest, fixing the things that our generation and before has got wrong. The world is in the state it's in because of the people that came before them, and they've, rather than pointing the finger of blame. They've taken on the responsibility of turning things around and sorting them out.
So I'm curious if, you've now evolved. You've lived a long life in business. You've now evolved to counseling people in business and leaders. If you could go back and speaking directly to the generation we're just talking about, if you could go back and offer some advice to your younger self about the way that you would step into entrepreneurship and make it more meaningful and less traumatic on your life journey, what would that advice be?
I think fear of failure stops a lot of people trying. I think you have to listen to your inner voice that says why you want to do something. Accept the fact that it might go wrong. In fact, accept the fact that it probably will go wrong. But that every time it does, you learn a new lesson. I think that self-doubt, lack of confidence, fear of failure actually prevents some brilliant entrepreneurs being entrepreneurs. And of course, later in life, we regret the things we didn't do rather than the things we did do. Even the things that went spectacularly wrong or didn't go to plan, you still gain in some way. My old mentor in therapy always says, whatever goes wrong, whatever bad things happen, there's always something good that comes out of it if you look carefully. So I think don't spend too long embedded in self-doubt and fear. Give it a go, give it a try, and be honest with yourself about what's working and what's not working, what feels right.
There's also a comment that you made earlier that I think it's easier to gloss over, is that I think the other side of what you just said, this idea that, to acknowledge your fear, but to not let that fear control you. Mm-hmm. I think the other side of it is something you said earlier about the idea that failure there's a greater likelihood that failure is going to happen. And in fact, failure might happen repeatedly until you find, how many truly successful, legendary entrepreneurs didn't fall flat in their face half a dozen times before they found their way, or found their way and still fell flat in their face, in different ventures. I think the other side of it is to deal with the reality that you may fail.
Yeah. We dress it up and say, oh, you won't fail. You either win or you learn, you don't fail. The truth is you set ambition out for yourself, you set goals for yourself, and if you don't meet them, you feel like you failed. And resilience is the ability to deal with that, get up, dust yourself down, and get going again. And you learn resilience from being resilient and the moments when you need to be resilient. It's like riding a bike. You could read a book on riding a bike, but it doesn't teach you how to ride a bike. Resilience is something that comes from experience. So in many ways, you should embrace the things that go wrong because it's helping you develop your resilience. And if you approach it that way, there's a positive benefit in the whole thing. To go back slightly a little bit in what you said, I spend some time helping entrepreneurs learn to read their emotions. Our emotions they're like a dashboard to us as human beings. Suppressing them is like putting a blanket over the warning panel at Chernobyl. Yeah, maybe you can't see all the lights flashing, but they're still flashing underneath. What you should actually do is inspect them and see, what is going on? What are those feelings? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling uncomfortable with this deal or this company or this person? Why am I feeling angry now? What's that about? So that sense of curiosity about the ways in which our emotions manifest and how we might use that to guide the decisions that we make. I think that's true self-awareness. I think that's what leaders have. And I think it's what entrepreneurs can benefit from.
Interesting. There was a couple of academics that came out of NYU that have written a book called The Coddling of the American Mind. And they talk about having studied this generation, Gen Z, They talked about this idea of fragility, that they're not being exposed to the kinds of social conditions that make them ready to enter the workplace. And I'm curious, if you have come from a reasonably well-off background, and is there a way to prepare yourself? Is there a way to manage that fear? Is there a way to prepare yourself to deal with the kinds of challenges that you'll face entering the arena? Is there a way? Are there things that you can do, I guess, to toughen yourself up to enter the area of wanting to be a leader, wanting to be an entrepreneur?
No, you got to.
You just got to do it.
I think you could spend 4 years trying to do that, which is 4 years in which you could have actually started, tried, had things go wrong, learned, had things go right, felt the elation, and learned a tremendous amount about yourself. I don't, and I'm not so sure this generation is as fragile as some observers make out. I think, like all populations at any age, only a certain proportion of the population will ever become entrepreneurs. And that proportion, I would suggest, is higher in the younger generations than it is in the older ones. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It really isn't. For some people, it is the worst thing they could possibly imagine. They love working in corporate environments where they have clear expectations and responsibilities and agency. They have good leadership. They have clear goals. They have a predictable existence. Their income is predictable. They have good quality of life. That is perfect to a lot of people, and they will sacrifice changing the world for that comfortable existence and that predictability. That is what motivates them. And for others, it isn't. And the percentage of the population at any given age for which entrepreneurship is considered an option is much higher in younger generations because, frankly, I think it's easier in some respects to start. I don't think it's any easier to succeed, but I think it's easier to start. And there's a lot more support around now than there was. I started out in the early 80s. We didn't call them startups. We called them new businesses. The bank wanted to see 3 years of finances for a business that started 3 months ago before they'd even touch you. Venture capital didn't really exist certainly for software companies. The attitude towards software companies, my dad always said, I don't understand why you're so interested in software. No one needs software.
My final question is related purely to the idea of leadership. And I think leadership in the sense of, completely apart from entrepreneurship. What do you think it takes to be a great leader in this day and age?
I think it's tremendously difficult, but I think you've got to start with brutally honest self-awareness. Understand, what are the things that you struggle with? Because until you understand yourself and you understand how to deploy your strengths and the areas in which you've been avoidant, because most people are, they avoid the things that are difficult. They avoid difficult people. And they have a set of biases which influence the way in which they operate. Till you can explore those for yourself and understand them, get a growth mindset. In other words, I will try things will break, I will learn. Develop strong empathy for other people and emotional intelligence. So in the way in which you understand what's going on for someone else, that non-judgmental approach. Actually, it came up this morning with someone about, an employee is telling me that they've got symptoms of COVID, but I don't believe them. Instant judgment. So I think it's a combination of factors, but I think that it starts, in my opinion, with self-awareness, self-understanding, and the curiosity to explore those areas and find ways to change yourself as part of the process.
That's a great answer. So I want to end there, and I just want to say thank you very much, Stu, for all of these insights. Super valuable. I could keep talking to you for hours. So Stuart Hillston, the Mindful Entrepreneur, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This is the end of our two-part interview with Stuart Hillston. The thing I took away was the importance of knowing yourself, being prepared for the emotional roller coaster that is business, and the need to be vulnerable and open with the people you care about as you're going through either leading a venture or working in one. I hope you enjoyed what you saw here, and again, please like this video and subscribe for more insight on the humanity we find in business. Thanks for paying attention.